There is a silent struggle unfolding within countless men of the modern world, a struggle so private that it rarely finds language, rarely finds confession, and almost never finds resolution without pain. It does not announce itself loudly. It grows quietly, fed by convenience, protected by secrecy, and normalized by culture. Technology has dissolved the barriers that once stood between impulse and action. What once required effort, risk, or pursuit is now available instantly, endlessly, and without resistance. Temptation no longer waits, it is always present. Ancient wisdom teaches that when access becomes effortless, discipline must become intentional, otherwise the soul begins to soften where it should remain firm. The excessive consumption of explicit stimulation is not merely a habit of the body, it is an erosion of the will, a fragmentation of attention, and a quiet draining of vitality. It reshapes the way a man experiences desire, the way he relates to reality, and the way he perceives himself. At first, the indulgence feels harmless. It presents itself as relief, a momentary escape from stress, loneliness, or mental fatigue. The modern man, burdened by pressure, yet deprived of meaningful rites of passage, often seeks refuge in what is immediate rather than what is strengthening. But the body was not designed for endless artificial intensity. It was designed for contrast, for anticipation, for effort preceding reward. When stimulation becomes constant, the nervous system adapts. What once felt powerful begins to feel ordinary. What once required emotional presence becomes dulled by repetition. The mind, exposed repeatedly to exaggerated imagery, recalibrates its expectations. Real encounters begin to feel muted in comparison, not because they lack value, but because perception itself has been distorted. This is the quiet beginning of desensitization, not dramatic, not immediate, but cumulative. Those who master themselves understand that restraint is not deprivation, it is redirection. Energy conserved becomes energy available. Attention reclaimed becomes clarity restored. Vitality protected becomes strength expanded. Transformation does not occur in a single act of will, but in sustained alignment between intention and behavior. It is built in silence, strengthened in solitude, proven in moments when no one is watching. Because the modern battlefield is internal, and the victory that matters most is invisible to the world. The man who reclaims authority over his impulses does more than break a habit. He rebuilds his foundation. He restores sensitivity to reality. He rediscovers depth in simplicity. He regains the ability to find fulfillment not in excess, but in presence. And from that presence emerges something rare in the modern age: inner stability. A mind no longer pulled by every urge, a body no longer conditioned by artificial extremes, a will sharpened by resistance rather than softened by indulgence. Ancient wisdom teaches that the man who conquers himself becomes unconquerable by circumstance, not because he eliminates desire, but because he governs it, not because he avoids pleasure, but because he chooses it wisely. And in that governance lies the beginning of true power, the quiet power of a man who is no longer ruled by what once controlled him. When a man begins to reclaim authority over himself, the first sensation he encounters is not relief, but resistance. The body protests, the mind negotiates. Old impulses, once indulged without question, begin to demand explanation for their sudden denial. What was automatic now requires vigilance. Ancient wisdom teaches that the early stages of discipline feel like friction, because the soul is relearning governance after a long period of surrender. There is restlessness in the beginning. Silence feels heavier. Nights feel longer. The absence of habitual indulgence exposes emotions that were previously numbed: loneliness, frustration, fatigue, even grief. Many men misinterpret this discomfort as evidence that restraint is harmful. In truth, it is evidence that suppression is ending and awareness is returning. The Stoics believed that one must never confuse withdrawal from poison with deprivation of nourishment. When the body detoxifies, symptoms intensify before clarity emerges. So it is with the mind. What surfaces in restraint is what was always present beneath distraction. This stage requires patience above all, not dramatic effort, but steady refusal, not aggression toward oneself, but firm redirection. The man learns to sit with urges without obeying them. He observes impulses rise, crest, and dissolve like waves that lose power when not fed. In this observation, something profound begins to develop: distance. Distance between stimulus and response. Ancient wisdom teaches that freedom lives in that distance. The undisciplined man reacts instantly. The disciplined man inserts awareness before action. That pause, however brief, is the birthplace of self-mastery. As restraint stabilizes, the body begins to recalibrate. Sensitivity, once dulled by excess, slowly returns. Energy levels begin to shift. Sleep deepens. Physical drive, once erratic, finds rhythm again. Vitality that was previously dissipated into compulsive cycles becomes available for other pursuits: physical training, intellectual focus, creative work, purposeful labor. The man often notices an increase not only in sexual vitality, but in general life force, a heightened readiness to act, to build, to confront challenges. Ancient wisdom teaches that energy follows attention. When attention is reclaimed from passive consumption, energy reorients toward creation. The mind undergoes transformation as well. Clarity begins to replace fog. Concentration lengthens. Tasks that once felt tedious become manageable because attention is no longer fractured by constant overstimulation. Stillness, once uncomfortable, becomes restorative again. Silence regains its sacredness. The Stoics believed that a man should be able to sit alone without agitation because agitation reveals dependency on distraction. When the mind is no longer addicted to intensity, it rediscovers peace in simplicity. Emotional stability strengthens too. Without the cycle of indulgence followed by guilt, the internal landscape becomes less turbulent. Confidence begins to rebuild, not from fantasy, but from evidence. Evidence that one can make a decision and honor it. Evidence that impulse does not hold ultimate authority. This form of confidence is quiet but unshakable. It does not rely on external validation because it is rooted in self-trust. Those who master themselves trust themselves, and that trust radiates outward into posture, speech, eye contact, presence. Relationships begin to change as well. When artificial substitutes no longer drain emotional capacity, space opens for authentic connection. Conversations feel more engaging. Attraction feels more grounded. Intimacy regains emotional texture rather than remaining purely physical. Ancient wisdom teaches that connection deepens when presence is undivided. A mind no longer conditioned by constant novelty can appreciate the depth of a single bond. The man who once avoided vulnerability may find himself more willing to pursue it, not because fear has vanished, but because discipline has strengthened courage.
there is also a shift in how women are perceived. Without the distortion of exaggerated imagery, perception returns to realism. Appreciation becomes less fragmented, less comparative, more human. Respect increases because projection decreases. The Stoics believed that virtue governs perception. When the mind is disciplined, it sees others not as objects of consumption, but as individuals worthy of presence and integrity. This shift alone reshapes social experience profoundly. But perhaps the most significant transformation occurs in the man's relationship with time. When compulsive cycles no longer consume hours in secrecy, time reappears, not created, but recovered. At first, this surplus time feels unfamiliar. The man may not know how to use it. Idleness can feel tempting because discipline has not yet been redirected into structured pursuits. Ancient wisdom teaches that restraint must always be paired with purpose. Removing a vice without installing a virtue creates a vacuum, and vacuums attract relapse. So the man begins to build structure. He trains his body. He studies. He works with deeper focus. He pursues goals long postponed. Energy, once scattered, now fuels construction. The Stoics emphasized that discipline is not merely the denial of pleasure, but the alignment of behavior with higher intention. A man who simply suppresses desire becomes tense. A man who redirects desire becomes powerful. Over time, the benefits compound. Mental endurance increases. The ability to delay gratification strengthens, not only in sexuality, but in finances, career, fitness, and relationships. The same neural pathways that once reinforced compulsion now reinforce patience. Ancient wisdom teaches that character is built through repeated decisions in moments of temptation. Each refusal strengthens identity. The man no longer sees himself as someone trying to escape weakness. He begins to see himself as someone defined by strength. Identity shifts from consumer to creator, from reactive to intentional, from scattered to centered. And with that identity shift comes tranquility. Not the fragile tranquility of avoidance, but the grounded calm of self-governance. Urges do not disappear, but they lose authority. They become signals, not commands. The Stoics never sought to eliminate desire. They sought to place reason above it. A man governed by impulse is predictable, easily manipulated by pleasure or fear. A man governed by discipline becomes stable, formidable, internally free. This freedom is misunderstood in the modern world. Many believe freedom means the ability to indulge without restriction. Ancient wisdom teaches the opposite. True freedom is the ability to refuse what weakens you. The man who cannot say no is not free, he is compelled. But the man who can stand before temptation and remain unmoved possesses a rare sovereignty. A sovereignty that extends beyond sexuality into every domain of existence. He eats with discipline. He speaks with restraint. He works with focus. He rests without guilt. His life gains coherence because his will is no longer fragmented. There is also a spiritual dimension to this reclamation. When compulsive indulgence fades, many men report a renewed depth, a renewed sense of meaning, reverence, and existential clarity. It is as though noise has been reduced, allowing subtler perceptions to surface. Ancient wisdom teaches that excess dulls the soul, while restraint refines it. In restraint, perception sharpens, gratitude deepens, purpose clarifies. The man becomes less driven by momentary pleasure and more oriented toward legacy, the long arc of who he is becoming. And this is where the transformation reaches its highest expression. He no longer practices discipline merely to avoid harm. He practices it because it aligns him with his highest nature, because it strengthens his presence, because it protects his time, because it sharpens his mind, because it allows him to meet life fully awake.